Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us here at Massachusetts for Safe Technology to talk about wireless risks and safer technology solutions, especially as they apply to our children and our children in the schools. So we're going to go through a program tonight where we'll go through slides, and then at the end of my presentation, we'll open it up for questions and answers. We ask that you, if you're comfortable, pop a quick note in the chat to say where you're from. It kind of helps people get oriented with one another. But we do like to keep the chat relatively quiet during the presentation so it doesn't distract from what others are learning. And before I get into the presentation, I'm just delighted to introduce you to our co-host tonight, who is Shelley Wright from Canadian Educators for Safe Technology. And Shelley is one of my heroes. She has been on the front lines of this issue for many years now. So Shelley, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this electromagnetic field work?
Thank you so much, Cece. It's quite an honor to be here, and I appreciate all the great work that you're doing nationally, internationally, and so it's wonderful that I can be here to support you and your projects as well. I'm a retired teacher and a director of a national nonprofit organization. The organization is called Canadian Educators for Safe Technology. We're a passionate group of educational professionals, and parents, grandparents, EMF experts who share a common vision, creating school communities where technology enhances education without compromising health. So this is super important to our group. And our team collaborates with leading EMF experts in environmental health and digital wellness, and those experts who are in electromagnetic EMF safety. And these are experts that can provide us with evidence-based guidelines and solutions for classrooms. So it's really excellent to develop that teamwork and collaboration with other NGOs and experts. So what we do is we review independent science, and we have learned that wireless radiation is radio frequency radiation, also known as microwave frequency radiation, and it can have acute and chronic adverse biological impacts on everyone, including children who are the most vulnerable in our populations. So the concerns that we have as Canadian Educators for Safe Technology is the development of children and the impact wireless microwave radiation can have on their development. They are more vulnerable to environmental toxicants. So that's our main concern. So with the increased use of personal devices in schools, there's the twin issue of digital distraction, as well as the RF exposures with the multitude of devices. And there's a lot of devices going on at the same time. And one of our concerns is we're noticing that youth colorectal and breast cancers are now on the rise, and cell phones are often stored in pockets. So this poses a concern for us. We know that epidemiologist Dr. Deborah Davis says that wireless radiation can spike the glucose in the brain, leading to ADHD behaviors. It can dysregulate hormones, which can lead to anxiety. So this can lead to a decline in student behavior in our classrooms. And it also leads to decreased attention spans with all these distractions, disrupted classroom focus, and engagement during lessons. So this undermines the ability of students to concentrate on their academic performance. So we are concerned as Canadian Educators for Safe Technology about excessive screen time, which it leads to increased anxiety, impulsivity, difficulty regulating emotions, and cyberbullying and all those other things, inappropriate online activity. And that complicates the learning that students in the past didn't have to manage. This strains peer relationships and student-teacher interaction. So a little less is focused on the educational part and more the behavioral part in classrooms today. So our concern from our national nonprofit organization is that physician-diagnosed students and staff like me also experience what's called microwave radiation sickness or electromagnetic radiation syndrome. And what this includes is debilitating migraines, some of us experience, loss of executive functioning, disabling vertigo for some, cardiac symptoms, which can include pressure in the chest or heart arrhythmias, things like tachycardia. And some people are severely impacted and may not recover for days or weeks. And for some, it can be permanent because microwave radiation is a digitally pulsed, modulated, pulsed electromagnetic frequency. So it can interfere at the cellular level, and that can impact us greatly. So integrated cardiologist Stephen Sinatra said that children who experience this are at an increased risk for stroke or heart failure. So we just want to say that we are super pleased that schools are developing clear policies now to promote responsible device use and policies, but they also need to include RF radiation and those impacts. So we're hoping to see that at some point school boards and school districts will recognize that the microwave radiation is also something that needs to be reduced, and there are wonderful solutions to do that. So our organization promotes safe tech best practices, which include superior modernized wire technology, which intentionally minimizes student and staff exposures to microwave exposures from wireless radiation. So in closing, by prioritizing these strategies, schools can foster healthier, more focused learning environments that support positive behaviors and academic success.
Oh, Shelley, thank you so much. We are so inspired by what you have been doing up in Canada, and we hope to be able to replicate some of that here in the US. So I'm going to go ahead and let you slip out of the spotlight, and thank you for being the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain back there to keep our forum running tonight. And she'll be monitoring the chat for questions that we'll take at the end. We do ask that we keep the chat relatively quiet so people can focus on what the presentation is. And so, Shelley, thank you. I will let you slip into the background now. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, Shelley, can you give me a nod if you can see that? Okay, great. So for everybody who's registered for our webinar tonight, we will be sending out the slides as well as the recording. And you'll have that hopefully, I have an all-day conference tomorrow, so hopefully by Wednesday, I'll be able to get that out to everybody. And we tell people, don't take our word on any of this. But if what Shelley and I have learned over the years can help you put together a safe launch point to go look into your own resources, by all means, use what we've got and keep investigating, because in the scientific literature, there is no safe level of man-made radio frequency microwave radiation. So the great news is, as Shelley alluded to, we have so many amazing solutions to deploy today that once we kind of get our minds around this industry messaging of all Wi-Fi all the time, we can get busy today creating safer spaces for us and our children, as well as the birds, the bees, and the trees. Okay. So I'll give you a little bit of background about how I got involved in this issue. I certainly never imagined that I would be doing this with you today. I was fortunate to earn a bachelor's degree in communication from Northeastern University here in Boston. And then I went on to earn my master's in technical and professional writing. And I was very honored that that skill set allows me to get up here and do what I do, which is to let people know about this issue and provide them with the facts. So that's what that MTPW is. It's just my master's in technical and professional writing. And I had no idea there was anything to look at with this issue. And in fact, I had run the local education foundation in my town for many years. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend, Wendy, who's an electrical engineer, tipped us off that there were biological effects. And it was book group, so I just made a mental note of it. And then not too much longer after that, somebody brought to my attention that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine had put out a position statement back in 2012 saying to our school superintendents, please do not allow wireless into our classrooms. And the American Academy of Environmental Medicine is a national organization of physicians that get the conundrum cases, the cases that regularly trained doctors can't figure out. But these doctors understand that there are many different environmental exposures that if we remove them can greatly improve a person's outlook on their health. Um, so when I saw that position statement come out, I thought, wow, is there any science to this? So I started doing the deep dive into the science, and we're going to walk you through
Let's
that
not use
today
them if I
too.
want.
Can I please ask everybody to mute? Thank you. So it has not been an easy conversation to have. Once I studied the science, I thought, wow, we've really got a problem here. And I was guilty because I spent 8 years bringing wireless infrastructure into our schools, Chromebooks and smart boards and iPads and minis and, Apple TVs, all that we thought we needed to get for our children for what the industry was pushing in with this 21st century classroom. And so once I started reading the science, I kind of raised my hand with my schools and said, hey guys, I think we've got a problem here. And at that point, I had been a volunteer in our district for many years. And by then, I was actually an employee of the schools as our grant coordinator. And so I discovered something called Donors Choose, which is a crowdfunding source to help teachers get stuff for their classroom. So I helped these teachers get over 100 projects funded to get the iPads and the Chromebooks and all what we thought was going to give our kids a leg up. And it turns out it's very biologically active. And we're going to walk you through all that tonight too. So it was not an easy conversation to have with my schools. But once we started looking at the peer-reviewed, non-industry funded science, we became the first public school district in the United States to have best practices for mobile devices that say, turn devices off when we're not using them. Let's not just leave them sitting around pulsating this radiation. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed. Otherwise, those wireless access points are pulsating microwaves throughout the building all day, every day. And then always place the mobile device on a solid surface. And we're going to walk you through the legal fine print today too, that says, keep this away from your body. So unbeknownst to me, we became the first in the United States to even take these baby steps towards safety. And then in 2015, I had worked with my state senator, Karen Spilka, who's now our Senate president here in Massachusetts. And I had brought her the science during her local coffee hours in our town. I brought the science. I brought Ashlyn's little sign. I have a meter that shows the radiation, and I measured her cell phone and her district director's laptop, and both devices went screaming off the charts with radiation. And they're looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. This is like big tobacco or alcohol or gambling or pornography or drugs. Adults will make their choices, but we are morally obligated to protect the children, all of our children. And so Senator Spilka put me with an attorney in her office, and together we crafted a very simple bill that would simply bring the right minds together at the state level and look at this issue and then decide what to do. So we have had bills here in Massachusetts for 10 years. And within 7 months, we got a bill passed into law in New Hampshire to investigate this issue. And we're going to teach you what the New Hampshire Commission found as well. So on this journey, somebody over in Europe found my work. Dr. Deborah Davis is a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate here in the US on climate change. And she was approached by this couple in the UK who had figured this out and reached out to her to see if they could reference her database with the Environmental Health Trust. She's got just an incredible compendium of information at the Environmental Health Trust. And she said, of course, because they wanted to build out a course that could quickly train the public in about an hour online. And she told them, you might want to contact this woman, Cece Doucette. She's a tech writer. She's made inroads with her schools and her legislature. So I met with Brett and Lynn West out of the UK. And at the same time, Dr. Deborah Davis introduced us to one of the world's leading scientists in Finland, Dr. Mikko Ahonen. And he had been researching the biological effects of man-made radiation for a very long time. And so the four of us hit it hard for about 6 months, and we developed a little nonprofit that's now called Safer Screen Time. And it's under the umbrella of our friend, Dr. Carrie Crofton, now out of Canada. And we literally have built a course that our schools, our communities, our families, our workplaces can take and be trained with the facts, literally in about an hour online for about the cost of a movie ticket, which just helps to keep our overhead costs paid. So we have so many great solutions today that we didn't have a decade ago when I fell down the rabbit hole. And then when my bill came up for public hearing at the State House, Dr. Deborah Davis from the Environmental Health Trust pulled together an international team of experts and brought them to the Massachusetts State House for a forum to teach our legislators about wireless risks and to indicate that everybody should have the right to know. And so for my first 2 years on this journey, I was just self-taught, and I just kept digging and digging and watching the picture get just darker and darker. So I didn't have anybody I could speak to for the first 2 years, but I knew I was reading credible science. So it was so gratifying to go to the State House with this world expert panel. We had Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on climate change. We had Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. So we had a captain of industry there who had met with a dozen of the world's leading experts and came back and said, our Federal Communications Commission's guidelines are not safe, and neither are Canada's Safety Code 6 standards. So we had a world leading scientist, we had a world leading technologist. We also had Catherine Steiner Adair, Dr. Steiner Adair, who published a book called The Big Disconnect. And she talked about every stage of childhood development and what technology has done to our children. So I was just sitting there stunned to listen to these world leaders get up to our podium in Massachusetts at our State House and tell us just how toxic all of this is. So going from being completely on my own on this to going to a standing room only forum at our State House, it was so gratifying. And I connected with people all over the state, and then I formed Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And I like to include that link because you can go out there and get to the science. You can see what's happening at the state level here. And all sorts of good initiatives. We also have a news page because when we first opened this conversation, people have been kind of trained by industry to go, oh, those are just the NIMBYs, the people who don't want a cell tower in their backyard, not in my backyard NIMBYs, or tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, right? So I created this website to make it easy and credible for people to get to the facts quickly. So if anything that we've done can help you, by all means, jump in where we are and take it from there. And then somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me to co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And I was so honored that Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada flew in on his own time and dime down to the NIH with us. We had Dr. Martin Pall, P-A-L-L, who's one of the world's leading scientists on this, and he came to tell us that we now know how this is biologically disrupting our systems. We had Theodora Scarato, who is the executive director of Dr. Davis's Environmental Health Trust. And then we had Peter Sullivan join us. And I had come into Peter's work through a video I saw online where he was giving a presentation on autism. And Peter had been a fighter pilot in his younger days. And so being a fighter pilot, he was up there in the Earth's really high natural electromagnetic fields in a plane that had radar mounted all over the outside, inside a cockpit that had all this wireless technology to be able to communicate with the land. And Peter, when he left the military, he went on to become, he was an engineer and he went on to work in Silicon Valley. And so it was like his friends who invented the cell phone and stuff. And then Peter's health started to crash. You know, he's big into technology, but he lost really unhealthy amounts of weight. His teeth started getting brittle. And when each of his two sons came up through the preschool years, they were both diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And so Peter and his medical doctor wife did what a lot of people would do. One is you start getting the toxins out of the diet. So you go to a clean organic diet to give your immune system the best chance it has for recovery. And they went so far as to do the heavy metal detox to pull environmental toxins out of the brain and the other organs, see if we can get them working best. And then he will tell people today, as a first line of defense, do the digital detox. And that starts with 12 hours at night with nothing radiating in your home, right? No wireless, no cell phones, no routers, put everything on a timer at night for starters. And because he figured this out, both of his sons were able to recover, and neither one of his sons are on the autism spectrum anymore. And I didn't even know that was an option. But it turns out there's something called de novo mutations, which means it didn't come from mom's bloodline, it didn't come from dad's bloodline, it came from somewhere in the environment. So when we learn to clean up the environment, we see all sorts of recoveries happening. And we never want to overpromise because we know biologically every single one of us is different and we are different genetically. So we don't want to overpromise, but we do want to give hope that there can be really important improvements that can happen with just a little bit of education and a lot of courage to swim against the mainstream messaging that we've been given. So I like to include this link for the National Institutes of Health presentations that we gave because they're credible and we were limited to 8 to 10 minutes each. So you can get a quick hit from world leading experts on this. So know your audience, know what kind of information they might respond to. And then one of the biggest gaps that we had when I got involved in this over a decade ago is we could tell that a lot of people were getting sick and getting misdiagnosed because our healthcare practitioners had not been trained on this yet. So we are so very grateful that we now have an EMF or electromagnetic fields medical conference available online at no cost. We held the conference in 2021 just as the pandemic had hit. So we were meant to be out in Scottsdale, Arizona, but we had to pivot, and bless the executive director, Elizabeth Kelly. She hired an additional new crew who knew how to do an online medical conference. So all those lectures were recorded and they are now available to you and to your healthcare practitioners and to your local firefighters and your local police officers and all of our first responders who need to know about this because far too many people get misdiagnosed, or when somebody knows that they're electrically sensitive and they wind up having to go to the hospital, they cannot be in that high EMF environment. And sometimes they get sent off to a psych ward when they really need biological support. So we're so blessed to have this EMF medical conference today. And I think there's upwards of 60 lectures from the conference. It was a full 4-day conference, and it's got all the discussion panels with the experts at the end of the lectures. And so people can slot these into their calendar, a half hour here, an hour there, and be trained by world-leading scientists, doctors, attorneys, building biologists. And I was honored to be brought in to speak to state and local policy. So just know, again, for everything we've broken here, we have solutions and we know how to fix it. So that's my history and how I got involved in this issue. And so I'll overview for you. what it is that we're going to talk to you about today. First, we're going to talk about the social and emotional and the learning impacts of today's technology. We'll discuss what it does to child development. We'll talk about digital dependency, and then we'll get into the radiation illnesses, and most importantly, talk about how to regain a healthier balance. And there is always hope, right? Every day is a new day. So we go into it with great hope and great facts to help us get there. And we'll teach you what to do. We'll give you baby steps. And then we'll talk about perhaps maybe something you want to do with your loved ones or your community is try a tech Sabbath. And we'll give you some great insights for that. Okay. So what does a child truly need for proper development? There's 4 things. One, we are meant to move. Those little kids are not meant to be sitting behind a screen all day and all night. We got to get them out and moving to integrate with their environment and develop all those synapses in the brain. They need tactile opportunities. They need to be touching everything in their environment. They need to be touching other people, critters, all of it. And they need meaningful human connection with trusted adults, trusted peers. They need opportunities to problem solve and to develop resiliency. And they need to be back out in nature. We are nature. We're not separate from it. We're just one of those other little critters crawling around on the earth. We are meant to be out in nature. And we'll talk about some of the really beautiful healing benefits that come along with that. So if we don't get ahead of this, this is what we've done to us and to our children. When we started putting ourselves in front of screens, the television set, the cell phones, the internet, we began to adopt a lifestyle that for many has become sedentary, leaving us isolated, feeling neglected, or we're neglecting our life, or overstimulated, where you feel like you're wired but tired and you can't quite get ahead of it. And all of this is leading to development delays and obesity, mental illnesses, feeling detached from our world, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism. And we're going to show you some of the studies on these. And then the long-term outcomes are not good. We are seeing diabetes in children and adults. And as Shelley mentioned, stroke, heart attack, addiction, violence, perversion sexually, over-medication, impulsiveness, and illiteracy because kids can't concentrate. And what does this lead to? Early death. We are now seeing that we are not outliving our parents anymore. It's going in the wrong direction today, that people are unable to form relationships. I remember when my daughter took a job at a local conference center and inn that had a little waterfront. She was a lifeguard down there and would help with banquets. And the woman who runs that place is my neighbor. And I was out at a holiday party with her. And she said, you know what? I just have to say, I love working with your daughter. She looks you in the eye and she smiles and she has a conversation. I said, is that unusual? And she goes, you have no idea. So many of these children today have not developed the human parts of their brain where we learn to interact and develop empathy. And if they've not been garnering their education properly and they've not been given good home training, then their job prospects become very limited. And this model is not sustainable. And I want to give out a shout out to another one of our colleagues up in Canada, Chris Rowan of Zone In. She has come up with this model here. And thankfully, she also teaches us how to create sustainability with developing our children. At the base, we need that movement, that touch, that connection with others, and our time in nature. This develops all of these wonderful parts of us, the parasympathetic nervous system, learning to develop healthy attachments and tactile stimulation to understand our environment, and the vestibular and proprioceptive parts of our body that will lead us to be strong and coordinated, that will leave us feeling secure and regulated so that we can be calm and focused in what we do. And then we have optimal development. We have the ability to pay attention and to learn. And this is a sustainable model for our children. Now, as many of you already know, among children and adults, digital dependency is skyrocketing. We are through these screens and all these apps that are not evidence-based. They're not there for learning. They are hijacking the pleasure centers of the brain, which is, again, leading to poor academic performance. And it's causing damage to the brain where we're not properly developing those communication skills. We're not learning how to develop and show empathy for others. We're not having time to ourselves to develop creativity. And because everything's given to us on these screens, we're not properly developing a child's own problem-solving abilities. And then there's that attention span of a gnat and the inability to self-control. So if you try to separate a child from their device and they lose their mind, you know we've got a pretty big problem brewing, and they are very likely developing a digital addiction. And then because all they're doing is touching and swiping, they're not developing those fine motor skills that we used to develop by learning how to write, being in touch with our entire environment. And then there's this whole epidemic of obesity from being sedentary. And one of our colleagues is Dr. Holly Grow down in Louisiana. And she had enlightened us that we now have an epidemic of myopia. Our eyeballs as humans are meant to be scanning the horizon at all times for predators. That's just part of our survivability. But instead, and Dr. Grow is a corneal surgeon, because we are in the shallows of these screens for hours upon hours of every day, it's literally changing the shape of our eyeballs. And now, even among children, we have an epidemic of myopia. So we got sold a bill of goods by ed tech, or the education technology industry. And now we are starting to pull our heads up and go, whoa, what they promised us has not come through. And in fact, it's doing a lot of damage. So there was a really good book that came out last year by Dr. Jonathan Haidt out of New York University. And he is a social psychologist who published The Anxious Generation. He's out of NYU. And he identifies that when we started giving kids smartphones back around 2012, we really destroyed their childhood. Notice the subhead on this is how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. And this book is really resourced in the science. You can get in there and look at all these statistics that he's got in there. But the bottom line is that leaving kids in front of screens has caused them to be socially deprived and spiritually degraded. They are suffering from sleep deprivation. Their attention is just shot. And there we are with the addiction again. So what Dr. Haidt recommends is that we don't give kids smartphones before high school. I know we've already done it, but it's time that we up our parenting skills and start working with other parents in the community and grandparents and guardians and schools so that together as a community we can support one another and really put restrictions around when and how we access technology. He recommends strongly no social media before age 16, and that we all work with our schools to have a phone-free bell-to-bell policy, because we are seeing incredible learning outcomes when we get these things away from the kids and they can focus once again on the most incredible learning tool, which is their teachers. And He says we got to get away from the helicopter parenting. We have got to give kids time to problem solve, to develop their own resiliency and their independence. Let them fight it out. Let them sort it out. We should not be giving them the solutions at every turn. Let them do it. So that's a great book. I know some of you might have read it by now. And then another really great resource is by Dr. Victoria Dunkley. She's a child psychiatrist, and she has created this program called Reset Your Child's Brain. It's a 4-week plan to end those meltdowns, to raise the grades back where they ought to be, to boost their social skills by reversing the effects of what she coined as electronic screen time. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So in the first week, she gets the parents' commitment to say, I'm serious about this. I'm going to put parenting at the top of my priority list, and I'm going to set a good example for my child. And I'm going to talk to everybody who surrounds my child to let them know that after I've got my plan in place, we're going to have 3 weeks where my child will not have access to screens or will have very limited access to screens, so that the child doesn't hop up the street to their best buddy's house and get their fix on their, gaming system or their laptop or their tablets. So you build out the support for that first week. And then over the next 3 weeks, we actively parent. We come up with healthy alternatives for where the children can spend their time. Let them have free time, and really set up a good plan so that they feel loved and supported while they go through this difficult transition. And I will tell you, at the end of removing a child from a screen, the child feels so much better. The whole family dynamics are so much better. And we are so grateful to Dr. Dunkley. I had the privilege of meeting her at the first medical conference we did out in California in 2019. And I had a booth, and she wandered by and stopped at my booth. And this is actually a picture of my book, because I had all those little yellow stickies there, because as I'm reading this, I'm going, oh my gosh, I want to tell so-and-so about this. I want to tell so-and-so about that. My friends, my loved ones, my colleagues. And she just was tickled to see that somebody had actually found her book to be very, very useful. So I encourage you to get these resources. Our libraries might have them by now, but great ways to help us help our children and our families. So what is the American Academy of the American Academy of Pediatrics? What do they have to say? So they have recommended no screen time before 2 years of age. A child and a fetus are doing such rapid development in those first 2 years that we really need to protect that above all else. For older children, no more than 1 to 2 hours collective time per day. That means at home, at school, at the friend's house, at grandma's, no more than 1 to 2 hours per day. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has a family media use plan. So everyone can come to the table and have a say in this, because we don't want to be authoritarian. We want to work with our children, ask them what they think makes sense, and of course, still be the parent in the room, but come up with a plan together that you will all agree to, and you'll also agree to what are the consequences if we don't uphold these new family values. So lots of great resources to help us kind of get that pendulum from swinging way out here to come back to the middle, to put technology in its rightful place, which is not in front of us all the time, but to create that balance. So that's what we know we can do to start down that path. But it's also critically important that we also understand that these devices themselves are not harmless. So now we're going to spend the rest of our presentation talking about wireless radiation and health, and then we're going to give you some ideas for a tech Sabbath. So I'm going to give you a demonstration, and I'm going to show you what the legal fine print in your phone has said all along. And I'm going to give you a demonstration of what this invisible toxin looks like. We're going to talk a little bit more about exactly what these radio frequencies are, what the long-term and the short-term effects are as documented in peer-reviewed scientific literature. And then we're going to kind of overview, well, where is all this coming from? What are we exposed to day in and day out? And this is my big question. Why don't we know about this? And now we've got answers for that too. And most importantly, we're going to give you a lot of different ideas to start taking baby steps toward transitioning to safe technology. Okay, so for anybody watching this with us who has an iPhone, I invite you to take it out right now and go into your settings. Now, this is also in every other device that we own, but I just happen to know right to get to it in the iPhone. So our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have created a page called See the Fine Print that takes out a bunch of these fine print disclaimers. And here's one that it used to say in the iPad. This can cause seizures, blackouts, eye strain. Who knew? I know personally 2 families on towns bordering on either side of me where these kids had their first seizures while using a tablet. Okay, so in the iPhone from the settings, scroll down just a little ways and hit General. From General, go all the way down to the bottom and hit Legal and Regulatory. On the next screen, near the top, about 4 down, you'll see RF exposure. So Settings, General, Legal and Regulatory, and RF exposure. And for anybody who has like an Android or a Google phone or whatever, if you just type in RF exposure for your make and model, it will probably bring it right up for you. But this legal fine print tells us 2 really important things. One is in that first big paragraph, they say that they tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you're holding this device the way that they gave it to us, you are being radiated at a level that exceeds our government's public radiation exposure limits. So those are set by the Federal Communications Commission. And you should know that the FCC has now been sued for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm. And we're going to give you some resources on that too. But what they don't come right out and tell you is that all the different services they've given us, such as cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot, 5G, all of these have separate antennas mounted in that one device, and each antenna is separately pulsating this man-made radiation going, here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Here I am, where are you? Looking for a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And again, our message is not no technology, it's safe technology, and we have solutions for everything. But if you go down another paragraph or 2, it'll say to reduce your exposure. Basically, once you know you're radiating yourself, don't touch something that's radiating. They say to reduce your exposure, use a hands-free option. And none of us ever knew that was in there. But that's how they cover their legal backside. So I'm going to pause my screen share for a moment, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of what this radio frequency radiation looks like. So this is a $400 meter that was recommended at the EMF medical conference. And I know one of the doctors who's actually with us today, Dr. Erin Acevedo, she purchased one of these, puts it on loan in her practice to her patients. And if I've got this right, she charges them $10, so they'll take it seriously. She gives them 2 hours and says, now go home, do your scavenger hunt, write down what your exposures were, and then come back and she'll teach them how to use their technology safely. So this is called the Safe and Sound Pro 2 broadband radio frequency meter. And as I said, it's about $400. There's like a baby sister one that's available from the same company for just under $200. And this is Safe Living Technologies in Canada. And we'll give you a link to them in our resources today. So I've worked really hard in my home because I circled my tail for a while and didn't want to believe any of this was true. But then I thought, you know what, girl, step up. You're the mom. It's your job to protect your family. So one by one, I identified everything that was radiating in my environment. And one by one, I taught myself through the experts, through videos on YouTube. I figured it out. And so I'm going to teach you guys what to do. But when I turn on this meter in the scientific literature, they want the maximum spike of this pulsed erratic microwave radiation to be less than 10. They want the max to be less than 10, and the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So like in 3 feet of air or a meter, how much radiation are we being exposed to? The goal is 10, just 10, 10. So when I turn this on and it boots up, I'm in the green, which is slight. And when I look at the number, I'm at a 3. So I've done the level best I can to protect myself and my loved ones. I'm at a 3. And now, I keep my cell phone in airplane mode as a rule. And so I'm going to take it out of airplane mode and turn it on. And I don't know if you guys can hear the noise. Sometimes Zoom will buffer that and kind of filter it for us. So I'm not doing anything other than turning this on, and all those antennas are coming back online. I'm going to go right back into airplane mode and turn my airplane mode on and make sure my Wi-Fi and my Bluetooth antennas are also off. And then I'm going to tell you what we just did. Once I turned it off, we dropped back down into the green, but when it was on, it was just blasting through the red. Flashing red is as bad as it goes. And we went from 3 microwatts per square meter to 3,180,000 microwatts. 3 million. And it's probably higher, but that topped off this meter. And this is what we're doing to our children and to ourselves and to our pets and to our birds, bees, and trees. And it's kind of been the wild, wild west of Wi-Fi, but there's a lot of really good things happening. So I also want to do a little more show and tell for you. So when we talk about protecting ourselves, those earbuds, bad idea. You're putting a microwave transmitter right up to your brain that's going through your brain to the other side of your head. And then it's communicating with a wireless device that you probably tucked into your bra or your waistband or your back pocket. So you're radiating all sorts of different points of your body and brain. So again, solutions for everything. Don't put metal up to your head with those earbuds or a traditional headset, because one of the properties of this man-made radiation is it magnifies or amplifies around metal. So if you're putting metal up to your brain, all the ambient radiation is going to be, ricocheting off of that and getting you double. So you can look for something called a hollow tube or an air tube headset. Notice these are just plastic and rubber, and it's hollow like a doctor's stethoscope, so you kind of get some good audio. These little ferrite beads break the radiation that comes up the wire, and then you just get, good acoustics with the sound control and the muting and stuff here. And then a nice big long wire to put some distance between you and your device. So again, this is a hollow tube or an air tube headset, and we'll give you some resources at the end of our slides where you can go poke around and see if you want to invest in one of those. The year I found out about this stuff, guess what my kids got in their Christmas stocking? And it wasn't an easy sell for them either, but they come around eventually. All right, so I'm going to go back into my screen share and give you some ideas for what you can do, even at the community level. So when I figured out what was going on with wireless, and having brought it into my kids' schools, I knew that we had a grant fund in our town. So I wrote a grant application to see if we could get one of these radiation meters for our library and then one for the schools. And the first time I submitted my application for $400 each, they said, we don't really know what you're talking about. Why don't you come back next time? So I waited 6 months and I reapplied. And the second time they said, gee, this is probably more of a Board of Health issue, not the city council or select board. So I went and I met with our local health agent, and he knew from the 1990s, when cell towers were coming in, that the wireless or the telecom industry had wined and dined them, brought them out to fancy hotels, and touted all the benefits of having cell towers in our community. And he knew enough that somebody had raised the question, well, what about environmental impacts? And the industry said, shucks, sorry, guys. The Telecom Act of 1996 says if there's any environmental concern, you can't sue us. And that's what the industry did to get this rolled out throughout all of our world. So by then, my bill had been introduced, and I had been testifying down at the State House. And as I testified in front of the Joint Committee on Public Health, I was reading their faces, and I could tell through their eyes that not one member of our Public Health Committee had any idea this issue even existed. So I doubled back and I started making appointments with our legislators. And over the years, I've met with hundreds of legislators, attorneys, staff directors, legislative aides in the State House. And with the exception of one person, when I opened the conversation and said, can you please share with me what you might know about the biological effects of today's wireless technology? To the person, all of them said, well, gee, until you brought it to my attention, I didn't even know it was a thing. The one gentleman who said to me, I know a little bit. Why don't you just tell me what you came here to tell me? And after I met with him for 40 minutes and shared the facts, he said, my father was the physicist who brought the team into Chernobyl after it blew. So this young man had just gotten out of Suffolk law school and was working with one of our legislators. So he knew what man-made radiation can do. And so then I realized I better get back to my town and start educating our town leaders one by one. And after I did that, then I resubmitted my grant application. And they offered me a grant conditionally. It was still new and unknown to them, but they could see there was something here. And so I was given $400 conditionally, provided that our library trustees would agree to take this into loan into our public library. So I had to go meet with the board at the libraries. And there was one gentleman who sat there with his arms crossed, and you could just tell he had hogwash written all over his forehead. There was another woman who, after I presented, said, wow, I want that device. I want to go to my house and see what's going on. And then a third said, regardless how we feel about this personally, we are a conduit of information for our community. And as such, I think we should take a vote. And so they voted 4-1. And Ashland Public Schools here in our little tiny town of Ashland, Massachusetts, we became the first in the nation to put a radio frequency radiation detection meter on loan. And then as I shared that with others, they became inspired. So now we have people all over the country, and perhaps other countries as well, who are now meeting with their library directors and saying, hey, these guys got one, we want one. And today it's a really easy ask, because most of our libraries are having to reinvent, because people don't come to libraries anymore just to get a good book. So now most of our libraries have a library of things where you can rent stuff like games and puzzles. I was at the Natick Library in Massachusetts this weekend, and they have snowshoes, you can get fishing rods, but they also have air quality meters, they have a kilowatt meter. And so it's not hard to say, let's also get a radio frequency radiation detection meter. So that's something that any of you can do tomorrow. And if your library has already used up their budget for the year, or maybe they can't afford 400, but they could do a partial, our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have a small trust fund or a small grant fund there, that if your librarian contacts them, they can help them to get that meter at a very low cost. So again, solutions for everything. And this is what you can do to not feel victimized, but to be empowered to do something to protect yourself and your loved ones and your community. So what is this wireless radiation and why should we care? So what happened when we went from a good, sturdy landline with wires that carried our signal to all of this mobile technology? What did we do? Well, we created these radio frequency electromagnetic fields. And sometimes when you open this conversation, people say, oh, well, the Earth has its own electromagnetic field, so it's fine. Well, the Earth pulses this beautiful healing energy 7.83 times a second, and the scientific unit of measurement for seconds is called a hertz. So just under 8 times a second, we get this beautiful healing energy that comes up with these electrons from the Earth, and every living thing on the planet is meant to be connected to that. It helps to regulate our own electrical circuitry with these electrons. And then we got fancy and we got into the digital age. And now everything that's operating in the megahertz range is 1 million times per second. We are getting jackhammered with these spiked erratic pulsations of microwaves. And we wonder why we don't feel so good sometimes. And then we got even fancier. And now we are up there in the gigahertz range, which means 1 billion times per second. We are pulsating ourselves with these spiked erratic square waves of man-made radiation. And as Dr. Martin Planck from Columbia University stated it simply, we are overpowered with man-made radiation. So again, that's a great book if you want to read from a scientist. But literally, that's what we've done. We don't even get out on the Earth anymore. We walk around in rubber-soled shoes that don't allow that conductivity up into our bodies. We sleep off the ground. We drive off the ground. So again, folks, getting back out in nature is crucial for our health and for keeping ourselves regulated. So that's what these electromagnetic fields are. Now, let's look at the science. First, we'll take a peek at the long-term effects, because for years, the industry would say, oh, there's no mechanism of harm identified in the scientific literature, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. So they did. Well, now we know scientifically that this causes child and adult cancers. The Food and Drug Administration, 2 decades ago, when the science was starting to mount up, commissioned a study with our government's research branch at the National Institutes of Health called the National Toxicology Program. They have long since been recognized as the gold standard for scientific investigation in the world. We're hoping to get back to that level of standard. We kind of slipped and let industries get ahead of our agencies sometimes, but we're hoping we're going to rectify that. So what did the National Toxicology Program study that went on for 20 years find? They expected to go in to prove that cell phones are okay, and instead they found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. Clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. And then the industry gets a hold of these good studies and they're like, that's just one study. You need more than one study to prove anything. Well, right on the heels of our cell phone study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy concluded another multi-million-dollar study on cell tower base stations. And guess what they found? Clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, among other findings. So we don't need more science. We need public policy to fix this and to get us protected. And again, don't take our word on any of this. You can get to all these studies through these links that we will be sending out by Wednesday. So DNA damage, that is the roadmap to grow a proper human or a pollinator or a tree or any biome on the planet. And we are damaging the DNA with these pulsations of microwaves. It was the infertility studies that got me on my feet. When I started reading the science, we saw that they have taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it caused DNA damage. It caused apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, and it slowed the motility of the sperm that did survive. And all this was happening in just 4 hours of exposure to a laptop's antennas. And when the World Health Organization investigated this back in 2011 and classified it as a Group 2B possible human carcinogen, they were careful to clarify that it doesn't matter where this is coming from. All this man-made radio frequency looks to be dangerous. And now that we have these rodent studies done with the National Toxicology Program and the Ramazzini Institute, we now have the World Health Organization advisors who specialize in this area saying, we need to elevate that now to a Group 1 human carcinogen. But sadly, the corruption goes all the way to the top of the house at the World Health Organization. We also have since gotten studies on women's fertility as well, showing that women using radio frequency radiation devices or sitting in an office with a wireless access point or a router are having fertility issues as well, including miscarriages. And then neurotoxicity. Folks, before the pandemic, we were already at epidemic levels of anxiety and depression. Children and adults, we're seeing suicidal ideation like we have never seen before. Insomnia. You know, it used to be that sleeping is what kids did best, especially teenagers. And now, because these devices are all over, we're seeing just too much harm. So with the neurotoxicity, Dr. Hugh Taylor heads up the OB/GYN program at Yale Medical, and he has done the rodent studies. And when exposed to a cell phone radiation, for example, for like 9 hours a day, those pregnant mice delivered pups that started exhibiting behavior much like a child who can't focus. Attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So Dr. Taylor is warning us we should not have this technology around our fetuses or around our children or ourselves. Dr. Martha Herbert, who is a pediatric neurologist out of Harvard, she founded the autism lab at Massachusetts General Hospital. And Dr. Herbert was seeing huge connections between what we know happens with these environmental exposures and what was happening in the families in her care. She is now retired, but she is still very active in this space. And then Dr. Martin Paul, who I mentioned, came down to the National Institutes of Health with us. He started culling the research on what we know about Alzheimer's, which used to hit in our 90s or our 80s. And then we started seeing it in our 70s and our 60s. And now we're seeing it in our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and even in some cases in our 20s. So we cannot continue to pulsate the environment of the brain with microwaves and expect that we're going to have the outcomes that we once had. And one of the challenges with this work is that mainstream media has now been bought out, where we used to have like 50 independent outlets. They've been bought out and bought out and bought out and bought out. And what we're left with are the same 4 to 6 conglomerations that own mainstream media that also own these toxic industries. So we're hard pressed to have mainstream channels to get this information out to the public. And so we're very grateful when well-known environmental groups like the Environmental Working Group get funding to put experts on this topic. As a mom, I learned about the Environmental Working Group because every year they put out their pesticide warnings and they come up with their list of the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. So the dirty dozen, foods where you're actually eating what has been sprayed, you got to do your best to avoid those and maybe buy organic for the dirty dozen. And then the clean 15 are parts of produce that are not heavily sprayed or where you're not actually eating the part that was sprayed. So that will reduce your chemical exposures a little bit. So we were just thrilled when they got funding to put a PhD on the wireless radiation issue. So again, know your audience if you want to go talk to your friends or your schools or your loved ones. If they already know about Environmental Working Group, then this is a nice segue into this topic. So for example, they have a number of fact sheets. This one discusses the effects of radio frequency radiation on our central nervous system, and it's all well sourced in the science. They have another one here for protecting kids from wireless in schools and at home. So excellent resources. And then we just need the reminder that children are not little adults. They are still under construction. Their central nervous system, their immune system, and their skulls are not fully formed. They are thinner, and their brain has a higher water content, and this radiation really interacts with that water. So with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues, they did the modeling where these heads are all turned sideways and the little yellow dot is the ear. So when we as adults and have a fully formed skull, we put that cell phone up to the yellow dot, which is our ear. We are pulsating our brain with microwaves about a third of the way through. And if you put earbuds in, then you're going to get it from both sides and all the way through. On a 10-year-old child, we see it penetrates about 3/4 of the child's brain, and on a 5-year-old child, it is radiating that child's almost entire brain. So we need to learn, we need to go get comfortable with the science, and we need to step up. And then the short-term effects, the good news is that after we do one of these education forums, people come back to me and go, I did not want to know about this. I didn't want to hear about it. I live on my devices. I run everything on my devices. But I took your advice and I created a sleep sanctuary where there was no radiation at night. And by golly, a lot of the symptoms went away or got so much better. So we're going to go through these short-term effects, but please know that our own government, through the Americans with Disabilities Act, has long since recognized not only chemical sensitivities, but electromagnetic sensitivities. So this adds credibility to what we're doing too. We're hoping that they will soon be empowered to really start getting word out on this. But for now, at least you can point to the Americans with Disabilities Act and say, hey, look, they recognize this. So maybe you recognize some of these coming up symptoms in yourself or your loved ones or your colleagues or your students. Insomnia. So now we know that mechanism of harm. We are light beings, meaning that all of our organs run off of this 24-hour circadian rhythm that is dependent on light and darkness to do resets of each organ throughout that 24-hour cycle. What the science is showing us now is that when we leave these microwave pulsations going all night long, the brain, which is waiting for the wee hours of darkness to release melatonin, that then goes in and regulates our sleep and helps to do cleanup through our bloodstream of everyday toxic cleanup. The brain cannot differentiate between man-made radiation. It's invisible to you and I, but the brain sees it, pulsating at us all night long, getting jackhammered. It's waiting for the wee hours of darkness. And so people may hit that tipping point where their melatonin is not working the way it's supposed to. The pineal gland would release the melatonin, regulate our sleep, do the detox through the bloodstream. And now we're impairing our own cleanup mechanism. So in addition to cancer and infertility and neurotoxicity, we now know what's going on with dysregulated sleep. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines. What child should be getting a migraine? My youngest daughter was getting them in high school. And once I resolved the house and gave her a clean sleeping area, she seemed to be able to tolerate most days what was happening at school because she could recover at night. And she's young and she has a young immune system. So, but now that we know better, we all try to do our best with that. Nosebleeds and ear bleeds, fatigue, pain from unidentified sources. So there's another well-documented effect that's called rouleau formation. And in my little brain, that sounded a little bit like candy rouleaus. But what rouleau formation is something that happens when we expose our blood cells to man-made radiation. So on a normal day when we're not radiating ourselves, if you looked under a microscope, you would see your red blood cells nicely formed like ovals or circles. And those red blood cells bring oxygen all throughout our systems and organs. And that oxygen allows us to do everything we need to do throughout our day, right? So what happens when you look under the microscope after you've radiated yourself is you will see that those beautiful smooth ovals are now looking like bottle caps, and none of them are free forming anymore. They have glommed together. This is an electromagnetic field, and they have magnetized and they're glommed together, and then they can't get to where they need to go to bring the oxygen. So when we talk to our doctors, they will tell us that oxidative stress is a precursor to most chronic illnesses today. Go figure, we're depriving ourselves of oxygen. So oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species, now we know to look at this and eliminate it and see if we get better. Skin abnormalities. Who knew, but we've got little antennas in the surface of our skin that kind of like the birds and the bees have magnetite in their beaks and brains and crystals and all sorts of fun things that help them to stay in sync with our natural environment. Well, that's what our little antennas do too in the surface of our skin. They help us to regulate hot and cold. You know, gee, do I need to go throw on a coat, or is it too hot? Am I going to overheat? It's because of those beautiful little antennas in our skin. And the industries keep spinning 5G saying, oh, it doesn't penetrate any deeper than the skin or the eyes. And I'm like, hello, I need my eyes and I need my skin. My skin is our largest organ, and it feeds into everything else in our system. So to say it's only skin deep is just a hunk of disinformation from the industry. So people will talk about getting the hot ear. We see flushing and rashes. So yeah, we can't keep radiating ourselves here. And then our big, beautiful organs, our lungs, our hearts are all electrically signaling us. They're whispering electrical signals all day and all night to keep us humming along. And we're overpowering ourselves. And so for some people, they begin to feel palpitations or an arrhythmia, or it feels like somebody's sitting on their chest and they're getting chest pains, or they're, hard time breathing, or blood pressure that goes too high or too low, depending on what's going on in your own individual body. Cognitive impairment, it used to be we'd go open the fridge and go, oh, what'd I come in here for? But now we're seeing cognitive impairment in all aspects of our lives. Children and adults, it's not just as we age anymore. It's doing a number on our brains. And then this is one of the most heartbreaking things for me at the EMF Medical Conference, was to hear more than one of the experts say, if we don't get ahead of this, we can well expect to see many more of these societal outbursts like we've been seeing with these mass shootings. I don't know where you guys are from, but when we sent the kids back to school after the pandemic, in which we had issued every child a wireless tablet with no safety instruction, and they're probably getting much more access, perhaps even unfettered access to those devices, while mom and dad are trying to hold down the fort and hold down their jobs. When the Boston kids came back to school, I was watching the news on different days, and I saw news stories in different school districts in Boston where the children had lost their mind, couldn't cope, and when they got upset, they were literally wailing on their classmates with that device. So it's not if this happens, this is happening, and wireless radiation is a key contributor. And I shared this with a woman I met at my gym, and she said, oh my gosh, I work at Framingham High School, and one of my colleagues is out on disability right now because one of those high school boys beat the tar out of her with his tablet. So it's happening. And with a little courage, we can make some serious inroads to fix this. Okay, so what can we do? Let's start by becoming aware of what we have under our control. The industry is forecasting that with 5G and the Internet of Things, we will all have 200 plus wirelessly connected devices in our homes. 200 pulsating us with microwave radiation. Smartphones, anything that's got a Bluetooth antenna in it, Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G, all the routers, all the access points. Those cordless phones are like having your own private cell tower, the wireless headsets, the tablets, the laptops, all the accoutrements, the printers, the mice, the keyboards, the gaming devices, those virtual reality where we literally stick a radiating cell phone on our brain. Probably going to want to rethink that one. Baby monitors, putting this radiating device next to our sweet little pumpkins. Smart hearing aids, not so smart. And all those wearables. So again, the message is not no technology. With my mother-in-law's hearing aid, we got in touch with the manufacturer and figured out that on her model, we could open and close the battery door and it would toggle the Bluetooth antennas off and on. And with the wearables, you can just put them in airplane mode, turn off the antennas, and you can still use your clock, your alarm, your whatever you've got on there. And then if you need to sync it up with something, just take it off your body, set it apart from you, and just let it sync for a minute or two or a second or two. And then you could put it back on your body without radiating yourself. And then there are community level exposures with wireless access points. Start looking around your schools. I have a little cable show out in Worcester, Massachusetts called Tech Safe, and I interviewed a technologist from Ireland who was on the cutting edge and was one of the first ones to start putting wireless systems in. And he said you could power an entire school with 2 or 3 of these, but the industry always goes with where the profit lies, and they have convinced our schools to have one in every classroom and every hallway in many of our schools. So these poor kids are just getting tanked with microwaves. Macro cell antennas and towers. So the big antennas started out in industrial parks far away from where we live, 300 feet up in the air. And then as they started selling more products, they needed more capacity. So they started bringing them closer and closer and putting up more and more and more cell towers, these macro cell towers, and putting them on buildings and painting them the same color as the building, hiding them behind things up on the roof, putting them in fake trees that degrade and put microplastics into our environment. So we started with the big cell towers. And then they got closer. And now we have these 5G small cell antennas, but they're nothing small about them. They still need the backbone of the longer wavelengths that allow 3G and 4G technology or 3rd and 4th generation technology. Those are big, long wavelengths that have the capability of getting through buildings, through walls, through floors to connect with your device. That's still the backbone for 5G or 5th generation technology. So they pretty much maximized all of those frequencies, and there's not a whole lot more to be earned off of that. What's left are these tiny little millimeter waves. And so the industry is spinning it up that we're going to have faster downloads, smart cities, super highways. Isn't this grand? But in order for those tiny little millimeter waves to do what they want to do, they can't have anything in their way. They disrupt the signals. Trees. In an era where our cities are facing climate change and they want to grow the tree canopies to cool our cities in the hot summer months, we see industry just come in and lop them off so their radiation can get through. Snow, rain, all degrades the signal. So what do they propose? Well, we just need more of them. Let's put one every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhood at bedroom height in our public access way. That is what 5G is. And the studies that are being done in Sweden and elsewhere are showing that people are developing these microwave sicknesses when these cell towers go in. And then there's the utility smart meters over here. When I was a little girl, I'm one of 10 kids, so we played outside a lot and we played a lot of hide and seek. So I would be hiding in the bushes, waiting to be found for a long time. And I remember sitting there just watching the dials go around on the meters for gas, water, electric, and today we have solar and propane. But those were analog meters. Those were strictly mechanical devices. Your town paid a walker to come in and take a reading, jot it down, go back to work and put it in the system, and that's how you got your bill. And then industry decided that they would be innovative, and they started talking our towns into getting rid of those mechanical meters that lasted 40 or 50 years in favor of digital technology. So if you go outside and walk around or go look in your basement for your gas, water, electric, solar, propane, if you look on those meters and if they have an FCC ID number on it, that means it is transmitting microwaves into your home. And the industry will spin it. Oh, that just goes, a couple seconds a day. Your cell phone goes way more than that. Well, now we know that's not great. But when I was getting ready to testify before the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, I took my meter and I went into my dining room where I measured the 2 electric meters that are mounted on the outside wall. We've got one for solar and one for our regular electric. And I sat there and I counted how many times did that pulse of radiation come into my home. And at the end of my little experiment, it was 17,000 times a day. And we know so many people who get sick when these smart meters go in. They have no idea what's taking them down. And here we are. So if we don't speak up and do something about this, this is the electrosmog that is ubiquitous today. And again, now we've got all the satellites being launched by the thousands up there. So we got to get busy, you guys, because there's no cavalry coming. We have a lot of really good stuff in play, but there's nobody coming to protect you and your family today. So we're going to teach you what to do. But first, I want to share with you my missing puzzle piece. I kept reading and reading and reading the science and listening to experts. And I was going, surely if this is bad as little me can piece together, somebody's got to have our backs on this, right? And then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing report called Captured Agency: how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And we'll note that the graphic they put on the cover of this free online 59-page report is a revolving door. And that's what so many of our federal agencies have become, as sock puppets for these industries that are polluting our world. So captured agency was my missing puzzle piece. And then I went, oh man, you mean we got to do this work? And we do. We have to bring the facts forward and empower our friends, our loved ones, our neighbors to start speaking at the local level to our towns, and then get them to speak up and talk to the state level with the bills, and then push it up to the federal level. Because until we do that, we're probably not going to see anything meaningful fast enough to protect our children. And as I mentioned, we've got media capture. It's all owned by these industries now. And when we open up the conversation, in my state at least, I put together a news page because people say, oh, nobody knows about this. This isn't a big deal. Go to my news page. Look at all the towns that are doing something about this. We are way behind the 8 ball. And then that $30 million study that our Food and Drug Administration commissioned that found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, that should have triggered public policy. But the gentleman who was in charge at that time, decades later, at the FDA was this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren. And he went over to his friends at the FCC and said, let's just keep doing what we're doing. We don't really believe that study. One might ask, what would ever possess Dr. Shuren to do that? So then we go and we look at, who is this Dr. Shuren? And he's married to a woman who's a partner in a law firm that represents big telecom, big Wi-Fi, big agri, big big pharma, big food, big chem, all of it. So we have corruption at every level of government. So there's nothing happening today. It goes sadly all the way up to the World Health Organization. You wouldn't know it, but there are two groups at the WHO. One is the actual scientists whose life's work is investigating man-made radiation and doctors. And then there's this other group that is stacked by industry, and they're the ones who keep getting a hold of everything up at the World Health Organization. But because the Italian study and the US study showed clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, they were made to reopen their investigation. But it looks like they've stacked the deck again with that committee. And we've got industry all over it again. And it's everywhere, you guys. Look at this. Remember in earlier slides, we said what the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending? They need to come straight out and say, don't radiate your family. But instead they say, oh, here's a family plan, here's look who's sponsoring them, AT&T, right? So industry has got their hooks even into our Girl Scouts. Ericsson is one of the big telecom companies. They worked with Girl Scouts of America to come up with a 5G badge to get these kids at a baby age to buy into 5G. And then they redesigned the sashes that the kids wear, and they put a pocket right there for a cell phone to go right over the children's organs with no technology safety training. So if they don't turn those things off before they stick them in there, then we're in line to do a lot of harm to our children. So it's just insidious, you guys. But we educate every step of the way. Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that when we finally do the right thing, it comes through 3 channels. The public learns and gets engaged, and that's what we're hoping to inspire with these webinars that we do every month for you. It goes through the courts, and we have some really good lawsuits that have happened and are underway right now. And ultimately, in the end, public policy catches up to the science. So I'm going to whip through some resources that you're welcome to go do the deeper dive on, but I want to pull out the highlights for you to give you hope, because there are really good things happening right now. For yourself, here's what you can do with the devices that you have control over. Our goal is to get to as low as reasonably achievable. That's called the ALARA principle. The Centers for Disease Control already recognizes with ionizing radiation like X-rays and the sun and the gamma rays, you don't leave yourself exposed to this. You create as much distance as you can. You spend as little amount of time radiating yourself as you can. And if you can't get away from it, you better learn how to shield, and you should work with a professional to do any shielding. And we'll give you resources for that too. So here's what you can do. On the back of your router, there are Ethernet ports. And this is not taking a step backward, it's taking a step forward to safe technology. Get a big long Ethernet cable, plug it into your router. Then you can get something called a switch. Here's the little one that I got in my living room, a little 5-port switch. And again, these are not really expensive items here. And then for each one of your devices, get a separate Ethernet cable, plug it in. This carries the signal from the street into your main areas for technology. And then you just start plugging your individual devices in. You can buy these little adapters for 20, 30 bucks and then plug it into your device. You can forward your cell phone calls in your settings to a landline. And I know so many people got talked out of their landline, but for about 20 bucks a month, you can get that back. And then you don't have to have any radiation in your home. You can just forward your calls in your settings to your landline. So it's all personal choices. So literally, physically cabling everything back up is the first step to hardwiring. The second step is now you got to double back and turn off every antenna in every device that you own. And you can do that through your settings. With the router, I called up my internet service provider and said, hey, I'm choosing to go with the safer, faster, greener, hardwired technology. It's way more reliable too than this buckshot Wi-Fi signal going out there. So how do I get that router in my utility closet to stop pulsating this microwave radiation? They said, oh, that's easy. Sit down at your computer. So I sat down at my computer. They walked me through my account, and all I had to do was go into wireless settings, and there were those antennas. 2.4 gigahertz, I turned it off. 5 gigahertz, I turned it off. By then, they had put hotspots on my router using my electricity to throw signal out to the curb for any customer going by, which should not even be legal. But we turned off all the antennas. And then I turned on my meter, and it was radio silence off of that router. And then I learned how to turn off all the antennas in the settings of each one of my devices. So it is critically important that you measure, because I thought everything was off. My daughter had been home over the weekend and asked if she could turn on the Wi-Fi for a minute. And I said, sure, just make sure you turn it off. And that next Monday morning after she went back to college, I'm like, why do I feel like the earth is sucking me down again? And that's how I always felt under fluorescent lights. It just drains my battery. So I pulled out my meter and I went, what the heck? I flew off into the red zone and I scanned my area, and it was my printer. And my daughter had done what I asked, and the little logo on the faceplate wasn't glowing for Wi-Fi, but yet it was still screaming into the red zone. And so I just looked online for the manual and I found it, and it turns out there were 3 antennas in my one printer. And that Wi-Fi button only disabled the one. I had to just dig around in the settings and find the other 2, and I turned them off, Bluetooth and something else that was in there. And then I measured again, radio silence. So it's critically important to measure. And as I showed earlier, libraries are putting these into circulation now. So go ask your library, and you can get help for that if you need it. So here's what Safe Tech looks like, right? Just plug in the dongle, plug it into the Ethernet cable and into your device, turn off all the things. And for our schools, our friends at techsafeschools.org, they have a project where they show the science, they show the health effects, and then they show our technologists and our schools how to mitigate. They can turn down the beacon signal and the power on the wireless infrastructure and on the devices by more than 90% without even losing connectivity as they make their way toward transitioning to using Ethernet cables and turning off the wireless altogether. So the solutions are built. We can bring them right to your schools. Please know that the FCC has been sued by the Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and others for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm that we entered into the public record. And the FCC completely blew off all the facts and said, we don't need to change our 1996 exposure limits before we had all of this cumulative radiation going on. So they got sued and they lost, and the courts ordered the FCC to protect children, to protect the elderly, to protect the environment, to protect those with environmental sensitivities. And it's been 3.5 years and the FCC has done nothing. Here in Massachusetts, our Board of Health at the state level, our Massachusetts Association of Health Boards, has a handbook for our local boards of health with legal recommendations to protect our communities from harmful things. And they've got 4 pages in there on cell towers. So here in Massachusetts, Verizon put a cell tower up illegally on top of a neighborhood. And for the first time in the United States, a board of health was ordered by their city council to investigate. And they did the deep dive, and they came up with this amazing report documenting all the harm, declaring that those homes where 17 children and adults got so sick that the kids were vomiting in their beds, they had headaches and skin rashes, The dog got sick. The pollinators all disappeared. And one man who could not leave, he wound up just riddled with cancers when they opened him up on his deathbed. So for the first time, we had a Board of Health step up, and now this lawsuit continues through the courts today. Here at the Face School in Massachusetts, which is a very prestigious international boarding school, like where Saudi princes send their sons to be educated, there was a boy who got very sick from the wireless radiation. And there was a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit, because the school would not grant accommodations for that child. And although they didn't win the suit outright, they had a big win in that it was the first time that US courts recognized that, yeah, you don't have to have heat from a device to have harm. The FCC allows this much radiation set to that thermal or heat level, and the science is showing these biological effects at hundreds of thousands of times, way below that. So it was great. These court cases build off one another, and we now have legal standing to show non-thermal biological effects. So that's what's happening in the courts. And then the third prong is public policy. And I mentioned in my opening remarks that New Hampshire became the first in the nation to pass a law to investigate this. And they came out with this groundbreaking report documenting all the conflicts of interest with the industry and our federal agencies, and making 15 recommendations to transition away from wireless for primary connectivity. Use it in emergencies, but don't let it be our playground anymore, and don't let wireless infrastructure anywhere near us. So that was a big win, but still industry keeps trouncing every time they try to enact their recommendations. But we do have a glimmer of hope at the federal level now that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been appointed to head up as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. So he oversees now that corrupt Food and Drug Administration. He oversees the corruption at the Centers for Disease Control. And, you know, he'll have some influence with the FCC. So we have hope because Bobby Kennedy Jr. is one of the parties that sued the FCC for ignoring the science. And he has said during his confirmation hearings that he wants to go after tech safety as well. So we do have hope that in these next 4 years, we might see some movement. But again, there's no cavalry coming to protect you and I today. So with the New Hampshire bill, this is what all of our communities, our states, and the federal agencies need to be answering to. Why do Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, and AM Best long since recognize this as a world-leading risk? And they put exclusions in their policies. So that leaves our schools, that leaves our towns vulnerable to lawsuits that could break them because they're not following even the fine print or the exclusions that they don't even probably know exist in their policies, and they don't have coverage for harm, and neither does the industry. Why does that legal fine print that we went through even exist? Why is the FCC ignoring thousands of studies? And they're only looking at thermal effects instead of where additional harm is seriously happening at the non-thermal level. Why do we allow 100 times more radiation than certain other countries? And why is nobody looking, not just at one device, but the cumulative effect of putting all of our children in a classroom with microwave radiation pulsating, and in our homes and in our cars, and now on the school buses in some states. So feel free to look at this. There's a great 20-minute video here with Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who served on that commission. He is the chair and professor emeritus at the University of New Hampshire. He headed up their computer and electronic engineering department, and he thought, oh, this will be a slam dunk. He had worked on medical devices for years and said, of course, it's safe. And then he got involved in really investigating, and now he's done a 180 and he's lecturing all over the world, but he's got a really good 20-minute lecture here that we can all learn from. So we now have 6 bills here in Massachusetts as well. We've had many of them for 10 years, but we are so deep in bed with industry. But maybe this is the session that we hit the tipping point, and you can look at those bills on your own time. And we have amazing solutions to bring our doctors and our nurses and our first responders and our therapists and our school counselors, everybody into this conversation. They can be professionally charged or professionally trained at no charge through the EMF Medical Conference, online on their own time. Physicians for Safe Technology with Dr. Cindy Russell, Dr. Joel Moskowitz. That's a safe place to send our healthcare practitioners. And then our engineers, our physicists, our technologists. When we were brought down to the National Institutes of Health, there was a call for papers. So Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada pulled together scientists and doctors and building biologists, and they published this paper for building science and radio frequency radiation. What really actually makes smart and healthy buildings? So many great resources to help us today. And then we have great things. The New York Times did an expose, a series of articles on what Silicon Valley execs do. They send their kids to schools with no screens, not wireless, not wired, no screens, because they know that's not what a child needs. And they go so far as to have their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. So lots of great things happening all over the country. All over the world, we're seeing bans because people know ed tech sold us that bill of goods, and they have not come through with their promises to improve educational outcomes. So starting with cell phone bans is an excellent thing. And then we worked with Los Angeles Unified School District with advocates there and issued a letter, 2 pages. We can adapt it to your school district as well, saying, bravo to those who are already recognizing we've got to get the cell phones, wearables, and other devices out of the school setting. And then as the second phase, let's address all of the wireless infrastructure, get it hardwired, and get the kids protected from the school-issued technology as well. So many great things we can help you with today. As I mentioned, our friends, Patty and Doug Wood, have Tech Safe Schools with a whole toolkit for our schools to come up to speed quickly. The Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already developed with experts kindergarten through grade 12 curriculum on prevention, ready to go. One of the doctors brought me into Pennsylvania for her children's health and wellness teachers professional development day. So we've got a slide deck already prepared. You can watch that 46-minute presentation where we actually got to train the teachers. It was great. And then there are groups that are cropping up now, Safer Screen Time. They have an online training course to get communities of parents up to speed on why we don't want screens near our children, and especially in our schools. I'm starting to have conversations with them about the wireless exposure too. But there's great resources for taking care of the social and emotional and the digital addiction things through their programs as well. So what next? Let's keep learning. I promise I will continue to give these free monthly webinars so you always have a safe place to send people, so you don't have to know everything. And I certainly don't claim to know everything, but I'll certainly share what I've learned. And again, free online. If the time doesn't work, just register and we will send you gladly the recording in my slides. There are 2 really good documentaries. Social Dilemma is the guys who invented social media. They did a Netflix movie that basically says, back away. This is not what we intended, when it became so taken over and it began to programmed to suck people in, to suck our children in so they can't get away. And then all of the political and pornographic and other harmful things that came in, that's not what they invented it for. So they are telling us, step away. Social Dilemma is a really good film. And then in this space, the award-winning film Generation Zapped was included as part of the United Nations Association's Film Festival. It took Best Documentary at the Women's Independent Film Festival, the Washington, D.C. Independent Film Festival. It's an amazing film in 74 minutes that will walk us through from world-leading experts in science and medicine, and far too many people have been injured by this. what this is doing. So this film is a great way to sit down with your loved ones and say, wow, you know what? I'm learning there might be some risks with wireless. Why don't we sit down and watch this movie together? It's available through most of our library streaming services and other popular streaming outlets. And then I came up with this little EMF points of confusion versus fact sheet where you can just skim it at a glance and say, well, you know, the FCC says it's fine. Well, here are the facts to support that that's actually disinformation. The inverse square law of physics says the radiation drops off with distance. Well, yeah, but this man-made radiation has different properties that pulsate and get through buildings. So distance is important, but don't be fooled. So just very quick hits on the objective comebacks when you open this conversation. Some folks have come back and say, yeah, I love that document. I print out a bunch of copies and I keep it with me. And when I open this conversation, I hand them that. And it's got a good graphic on the last page of what it's doing to us physically. So for today, let's gun for as low as reasonably achievable. Let's start noticing, what are we doing? And then empower yourself with baby steps. It's overwhelming. When my kids used to get overwhelmed with something or angry about something, I'd say, go scream into a pillow and get it out of your body. It's what the birds and the dogs do. They shake off a stressful situation. And then we just come back to the kitchen table and sit down and talk about, what can we do? So start with baby steps. Think about creating that sleep sanctuary, because if you don't, we're going to get to a tipping point and you might not be able to recover. And then make your way to transitioning to hardwired technology when you're not on the go. Put everything in airplane mode. Make sure that your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi stay off, because if it just says on or not connected, it's still pulsating for that connection. So make sure it's all turned off. And then maybe with your family, with your friends, with your community, you decide to do a tech Sabbath and together empower one another to have the courage to step away. With great thanks to my friend Marianne Tierney, she and I did some role playing together at the EMF Medical Conference. That video is available. But she and I were brought in to do a generation, the anxious generation, to do a program around that. And she included some great information on this tech Sabbath. So talk to your loved ones, let them know that you're going to unplug, and then brainstorm together. Let everybody have a say in what you're going to do. Maybe you'll go hiking, play games, craft projects, or just have some downtime. Curl up with a good book. Plan the food out so you don't have to go online to order food or to get a recipe. And then do your preparation. Create a box where everyone's going to deposit their stuff, right? Make a Sabbath box. Just confirm with everybody what the plan is, and let those around you who might be looking for you while you're unplugged, let them know what you're up to, and write down how to contact them so you can literally call somebody on a landline, and you won't have to keep accessing your wireless tech. Get all your directions, print them out, take them with you. Check for menus if you need to ahead of time, and then get all your stuff together to have a really great Sabbath. Go to the library, right? They've got amazing stuff. And again, have your food plan in place. We love this quote from a CEO of iBuyDirect. He basically says there is nothing except for a life and death situation that would cause him to compromise this Sabbath. And as far as his business and his income are concerned, they can wait. You can't go in willy-nilly like, oh, maybe I'll do it. You just got to do it. So here are the resources I spoke of. Our colleague, Carrie Crofton up in Canada, has this wonderful book with tech wellness plans in it called Less Screen, More Green. The Environmental Health Trust has a ton of great flyers, postcards, some in multilingual, that you can just print out and hand out and hang up. And then here's links to the phone-free school movements and Screen Strong. The Building Biology Institute has highly trained and certified professionals who can help you mitigate all of the environmental toxins in your home, you know, the mold, the water damages, the VOCs, formaldehyde, and many have become certified in electromagnetic radiation specialties as well. And then less EMF. This is a good company to go to if you want to buy some of the shielding or the hollow tube headsets. There's others out there, Tech Wellness. There's Shield Your Body is another reputable one. So, and then Safe Living Technologies is the one that has the meters that are calibrated and certified in a third-party lab. We trust them very much. Their founder is part of the Building Biology Institute too. Great tech support with all these guys. So thank you. We invite you to come back time and again. Digest all of this. We know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose, but no cavalry coming. It's your choice whether you want to just continue as is or whether you want to pluck up the courage and do some things to start having excellent technology, but without these giant risks. So reach out to us. This is Shelley's, our co-host today. This is her Facebook page, and we invite everybody to go out there. We just started this, so please join us, like us, because as we transition, we've got a 10-town pilot going in North America right now, and we're getting people around us educated first, and then we're going to go speak to the schools. So if you guys could go out there and like this or follow it or whatever it does, when we get to the schools, that will just lend a little bit more confidence as we open the conversation with our administrators. And then, as I mentioned, I'm part of this little nonprofit where we can literally train everybody in about an hour online. Less than the cost of a movie ticket. It allows you to print a handy tip sheet of reminders at the end. And in the workspace or the schools, there's little quiz questions all the way through, and you'll get a certificate of completion showing how you did. And then you can turn that into human resources to check off that you've been trained on this. So we're trying, you guys. We've got so many solutions, and we'd like to open it up now for questions. I will stop the screen share and ask Shelley if she wants to come on with us again, and I will spotlight you.
Oh,
And
thank you,
if
Cece.
there's anything in the chat that people are wanting to know.
Well, Goldie was saying that she did a measurement in her place and in her home, and it seems like her levels are pretty high. She understands that homes around her could make an impact, and they can. And also the 5G antennas can do that as well. But her concern is that when she speaks to neighbors, that they don't share the same level of concern that she does. And I know that in my personal experience, I'm now going door to door to talk to people. I mean, I've done a lot in my local area as well as different levels across Canada. But I find that it sometimes takes people a while to really grasp it. So we need to just be super patient, know that everyone's at a different level of understanding, and they'll get there in time. And I just love the presentations you do, Cece. This is not the only one I've attended, and I will attend others because I get so much out of them each time I attend. If I block the time to do this, I'll actually go through it. If I
Yeah.
don't, sometimes it's hard for me to actually block a set of time when I'm busy with meetings and other things. So it's really nice to have this reserved for this time to learn about these things. Because
Well,
I'm
good.
learning.
And I'm just so honored to have you as our co-host because you are in the thick of it. And
Yes.
that brings such a level of experience that, we have to learn about. And,
Mm.
like I say, we welcome anybody to come back as often as you want. Get the courage to make a little change, see how that goes, come back, learn a little bit more, and let's just keep going on and be very patient, like Shelley said, with others. Be kind, be heart-centered, because when I first got started, I had to learn that lesson that if I come off as, oh my God, we're frying our kids, then it ignites the amygdala, which puts people in fight or flight mode, fight, flight, or freeze. And when the brain is doing that old brain behavior to survive, they can't take in the information that we want to share. So that's why I try really hard to, make it digestible and accessible. But yeah, so were there any other questions in the chat?
Goldie has a part two.
Mhm.
She just added some more. She said, she was concerned that what causes the mobile connections from being lost along the highways and freeways, probably her favorite routes. Is it some kind of blocking thing that people have? And I know that you know the answer to this. So I thought I'd just let you share that. Yeah.
Well, from my perspective, you don't want to be inside of a car with something that's radiating. So your head is the highest beacon in the car. And when you're in a metal box like a car, that radiation is just bouncing wildly in there, and your
Mhm.
noggin is prime candidate for that. So you really shouldn't be making phone calls. What I will do is I will make all my arrangements from my computer wherever I'm going. I keep my cell phone in airplane mode. And one of the little hacks that I've learned is that you can turn on your cell phone for a second, open up your nav, type in the address and get your map. And then once you've done that, put it in airplane mode and it will take you where you need to go so long as you don't make a wrong turn. It's using some other type of satellite triangulation system that locks onto you as soon as you download that. But it's not using the pulsations of microwave radiation. It's a different technology. So when I get somewhere, if I think someone might be looking for me, I'll take my cell phone out of airplane mode, set it away from me, let messages come in, and then before I pick it up, I'll put it back in airplane mode and then pick it up, and then I can, well, like this. I'm really bad at it. Actually, I use the voice control on my voice command on mine a lot. I will compose my messages in airplane mode and then set it aside. And for just a split second, I'll go active and then I'll send the messages. So sorry, Golda. I know actually in the areas where you're getting drop calls, that's probably where the radiation is lower. So you might look to move into those areas instead because our cities just aren't safe
Mhm.
anymore.
Mhm.
But I know some people live in the city, work in the city, have to be there. But one of the products that I purchased from Safe Living Technologies, and I don't get any endorsement from there, residual or anything, but after the EMF medical conference, after I really learned what I learned, I went and bought myself a sleep canopy. And it's beautiful. It looks like, Knights of Arabia, kind of this gauzy fabric. It's, off-white. It's very pretty. But inside each thread is a metal fiber that creates a mesh shield so those wavelengths can't get in. And my house is kind of up on a hill and there's a cell tower out in the offing. And so in my bedroom, I might get readings of like 25 or 30 microwatts per square meter, and I want to be less than 10. So I want as good a sleep as I can get because I'm not electro hypersensitive. Um, so I can still get out into society if I clean my act up. So I get inside my little beautiful shielded canopy and I bring my meter in there with me and I measure, and I'm under 0.1 microwatts per square meter. So that allows me to sleep well. So if you have to be in a city, you might consider shielding yourself that way. But again, call up the experts at something like Safe Living Technologies and make sure you're doing it right. Because if you don't do it right, you could get yourself injured. So, Shelley, go ahead and share with us your experience there.
And I just want to say that I did become wirelessly injured. So we come from a high-tech family. My husband's an engineer, a mechanical engineer. My daughter's an environmental engineer, and my son is a computer science student. So we love our tech, but I am physician diagnosed by the director of Women's College Hospital. She's the director of the environmental health clinic. She's well known. And there's a 2-year wait list. It's just so long because there are now more people who are connecting the dots and understanding that when they use their technology, they get these adverse symptoms. When they're away from technology, those symptoms disappear. And if you record those, you have a better idea of what's happening. If you don't record them, you can just dismiss them and go, I'm not feeling so great about around my cell phone, but no biggie. But I discovered that unless you actually document it and then see what happens when you're away from that wireless, you may not connect those dots as quickly and you may just suffer longer. But anyway, we use my husband we use tech all the time. Everything's wired in our house. We use power line carriers and little plug-ins. So everything we have Ethernet cables that are either 100 feet long or any distance that you need. And also, he uses different apps that are downloaded ahead of time and can be used in person. There's the traveling using when we're traveling and we're using the GPS. That is all. Everything is in airplane mode because I can't tolerate the signals. And as Cece, as you said, the cars do behave as a Faraday cage. With the metal all around you, the signals can bounce around a little bit more and it can amplify the signals that are there. And we do want to protect pets and family members and those kinds of people who are important in our lives. So if we can reduce our wireless technology by at least turning off the router at night, having a light timer, that kind of a thing can help just so people can have the nighttime healing. So as you mentioned, the pineal gland can release the melatonin and heal our bodies. That can help you greatly during the day.
Excellent.
And we have Rebecca Smith. I hope everyone can read some of the things that are happening in the chat. She also has something that she'd like everyone to see as well. And I hope this person, Sachila, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. They're trying to get their son's school wired. It's a small private school, and we do know of schools that have been wired, the private schools. That's a great way to start there. And there's a lot of resources that Cece Doucette you have, as well as Tech Safe Schools, Dougwood and Patty and the others. So that information can be super helpful.
Yeah, so Sheila, you definitely want to have a meter in hand. And the way that I open the conversations with people is just, hey, have you heard about what's going on with wireless and health issues? And most of them will go, no. Say, do you by chance have an iPhone? And let me just show you, what the legal fine print says. So that takes it from tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists that the industry has trained us all to think that takes it to holy moly, that warning's been in there all along. And then if you have a meter in your hand, you can say, yeah, I know it's invisible, but would you like to see what the levels are around your device? And most of them are pretty curious and they'll go, yeah. And then they'll go, oh, and then you can invite them to one of our webinars, or you can invite me into your school. I would be more than honored. I'm scheduled to go Wednesday to a school in Beverly, Massachusetts and meet with the PTO because somebody there saw an invitation to another one that I had done at a church. So, planting these seeds is really important. But reach out if you have questions, if there's something I can help with, that's what we're here for. So, all right. Well, guys, we did well. We got our 2 hours in. I think we covered all of our questions. But again, I will send out the slides and the video on Wednesday. And as ever, reach out if there's anything we can do to help you create tech safety in your world. Shelley, thank you so much. Always my honor and privilege to be with you. And Shelley was my guest for a couple episodes of Tech Safe, which is our cable station show. So if you really want to learn more about her story, you can go out to my YouTube channel, Cecilia Doucette, and you can see Shelley's wonderful information there too. So, all right, everybody, have a tech safe day and let us know how we can help. Bye-bye.